I don't know that the mics work.
You all heard this announcement if you were here last week. The deadline for nominations for the Talmud Torah Award winner or winners is September 21st. I've handed them out. If you have any friends who might be interested, there are extras up there on the book stand. You have choices. You could either turn it in to me, turn it into Norman when he evolves back from Oregon, turn it into Janet Baseman, or turn it in online. But the deadline is the 21st of September. Thank you. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you, Bobby. All right. Good morning. So we have extra bagels, if anybody needs more. We have extra bagels. All right, so let's sing Bless, and then I have one announcement just because Hillary just reminded me that maybe it's a good idea to tell you what's happening in the temple. And then we'll get into learning. Yay! All right, so here we go. V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם בני ראובן בני ישראל אותי לעולם אותי לעולם ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם וביום השביעי שבת וינפש שבת וינפש שבת וינפש ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם סברי ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם בורא פרי הגפן. Amen. L'chaim. Woo. All right, and our blessing for Torah study. I feel like we could get a better brand. You know, it's just not good grape juice. I love grape juice. But anyways, our blessing for Torah study. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen, amen. All right, so it is a pleasure to be with you all this morning. So I just got a question about Beth Am offering Melton classes. So just so you know, after the high holidays, we are going to be offering what's called Beth Am University. Which is going to have a lot of adult education opportunities for everyone here, including Hebrew classes, both beginner and a little bit more intermediate, Torah study, more advanced Torah study, Talmud study. I think I'm teaching a class on Mishnah, all sorts of things, Jewish history, Israeli history, Zionism, the Middle East conflict. So really, really good stuff. I know Rabbi Barris is going to be talking about it on the high holidays. So,
Could you add Yiddish to that,
I personally can't, but if somebody would like to. There's certain, it's really funny because growing up in Fort Wayne, Indiana, you didn't really hear a lot of Yiddish, even with my parents. So there was a lot of Yiddish words that I had to learn after I left. And then there were certain words like polkies that I thought were English. Or kepi. I was like, what do you mean? Not everybody knows what this word is. Okay. So I want to start today by talking about judgment. And I spelled it with an E on the handout, but because I already was judged about it, I'm going to put it without. All right, so let's think about, what do we think about when we hear judgment? Give me some words. Like, what do you, or sentences. Like, what do you think about? Courts, okay. Courts. Okay. Right, so you mean like criticism, right? Right, okay. Ooh, now we should really talk about spelling. No, that's not right. Decisions. Morality. Yes, okay, ethics and morality. Beautiful. Ooh, vanity. Impartial, okay. Okay, specific trials. Okay. So, punishment. Good. Ooh, and we can think about that in two ways too. Yeah. Okay. Acquittal. I'm going to put that next to acquittal. Forgiveness. Oh, there. Okay. Jurisdiction. So some of you know a lot of. All right. So I wanted to kind of witnesses and. Okay, so judgment has a lot of positive words associated with it, right? We want to have good judgment, right? And we can't live in a just society without judgment, right? So some of you were even starting to get a little bit into the Kabbalistic aspect, right? So Din, which is judgment, is balanced with rachamim, which is mercy. So when we started to get to the acquittal, forgiveness, right? Often, in the Hebrew, we think about Din, judgment, as punishment and justice and ethics and morality, right? So if we say that someone has good judgment, it's a positive thing, right? We need that in life. And that can be either how we look at others, which is what we most often, but also our own decision making, right? But judgment is also a nasty thing, right? When we feel judged by others, and then we have being judged by ourselves. But we need judgment to make decisions. We need ethics and morality, hopefully, to drive our judgment, all of these things. And then conviction, I loved that, because conviction plays on both positive and negative, right, in terms of what it means to be judged. So we're going to be talking a little bit about judgment today because in our Torah portion, right, we're in Devarim, the beginning of Deuteronomy, this series of Moses' speeches to the people. We are posed to enter into the promised land. For some reason, my phone decided to start listening to us. we're poised to enter into the promised land. One of God's promises has already been fulfilled, right? That we are now as numerous as the stars in the sky, right? Huge group of people. And now the second promise is going to be fulfilled. We're going into the land. Moses knows he's not going to make it, right? So he's like, I'm going to prepare the path, give the speeches to the people, give them my words of wisdom, my ethical will, if you will, before I leave them. And so what is the first thing he talks about? He recounts the scene from Exodus 18, where Yitro encourages him to appoint judges. So I gave us a parallel because I'm a Reformed Jew, and I love seeing when things are reformed or reinterpreted already in the Torah, okay? And because I want us to think about why is it that at this particular moment, Moses wants us to think about judges and judgment. And why is that like the first thing we need when we're entering and creating and setting up our new society? Okay? All right. So this is a little long, but it's okay. Will you read for us from Exodus? I want us to look at the differences between the Exodus passage, so we're going to revisit it, and then we're going to look at the Deuteronomy passage, which parallels.
Next day Moses sat as magistrate among the people, while the people stood about Moses from morning until evening. But when Moses, his father-in-law, saw how much he had to do for the people, he said, "What is this thing that you are doing to the people? Why do you act alone while all the people stand about you from morning until evening?" Moses replied to his father-in-law, "It is because the people come to me to inquire of God. When they have a dispute, it comes before me, and I decide between one party and another, and I make known the laws and teachings of God." But Moses, his father-in-law, said to him, "The thing you are doing is not right. You will surely wear yourself out, and these people as well, for the task is too heavy for you. You cannot do it alone. Now, listen to me. I will give you counsel, and God be with you. You represent the people before God. You bring the disputes before God, and enjoin upon them the laws and the teachings, and make known to them the way they are to go and the practices they are to follow. You shall also seek out from among all the people capable individuals."
I know, it's a long section. Thank you. Got to turn the page.
"Who fear God, trustworthy ones who spurn ill-gotten gain. Set these over them as chiefs of thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens, and let them judge the people at all times. Have them bring every major dispute to you, but let them decide every minor dispute themselves. Make it easier for yourself by letting them share the burden with you. If you do this, and God so commands you, you will be able to bear up, and all these people too will go home unwearied." Moses heeded his father-in-law and did just as he had said.
Okay, beautiful. All right, so we're going to now look at the parallel from Deuteronomy. Before we do that, do we want to share a few things that we notice? You guys are very familiar with this? Yeah. All right, it's the delegation. Yitro is giving, right? So good to have mentors, right? They don't have to like be from the same church, right? Because here we have the Midianite priest teaching Moses Rabbeinu, right? The importance of mentors, of making rules transparent, all of these things, not holding all of the load by yourself, right? That Moses is going to wear out not just himself, but everybody else doing what he's doing. All right, so now we're going to go to the Deuteronomy parallel. This is Moses recounting the story. So I want us, as we go along, keep in mind Exodus, okay? Notice what is different. All right. Bobby, thank you.
Thereupon I said to you, I cannot bear the burden of you by myself. Your God, Adonai, has multiplied you until you are today as numerous as the stars in the sky. May Adonai, the God of your ancestors, increase your numbers 1,000-fold and bless you as promised. How can I bear unaided the trouble of you and the burden and the bickering? Pick from each of your tribes candidates who are wise, discerning, and experienced, and I will appoint them as your heads. You answered me and said, what you propose to do is good. So I took your tribal leaders, wise and experienced men, and appointed them as heads over you, chiefs of thousands, chiefs of hundreds, chiefs of 50s, chiefs of 10s, and officials for your tribes. I charged your magistrates at that time as follows. Hear out your fellow Israelites and decide justly between one party and the other, be it a fellow Israelite or a stranger. Intermission while I turn the page. You shall not be partial in your judgment. Hear out low and high alike. Fear neither party, for judgment is God's. And any matter that is too difficult for you, you shall bring to me, and I will hear it. Thus I instructed you at that time about the various things that you should do.
Awesome. Okay. So what do we notice about what's different between one and the other? Yes.
In the second one, he uses the word Israelites.
Okay, Jeff notices that in the second one, just because you're not using my, in the second one, he's using the word Israelites. So already, like, looking at us as a different people, right? We're about to enter the land.
Well, they are a different people because it's the first one's.
I don't know if this is on. It's not on. All right.
Well, first of all, he doesn't have a mentor. He says I. He doesn't bring in Yitro at all. But the other thing is, I look at it differently because he's addressing a different set of people, because the first set of people died already. So they're the ones who haven't gone through the desert or anything just yet. These are the second generation.
Okay, great. So two observations here. The first is, no Yitro. Where's Yitro in his recounting of this conversation, right? It's not, my father-in-law noticed what was going on and said to me to do this, right? I couldn't bear the burden. I. Okay, so we can look at it two ways, right? One is the classic of rabbis taking credit for good ideas that belong to other people, right? Or we can look at it in a positive way, where Moses is really owning it. Am I saying I? He's saying, my father-in-law was right? I couldn't bear the burden of you. What I was doing was wrong. I needed to be transparent, teach you the rules, and appoint. Yeah.
In the second one, it talks about the people fetching and bickering, which that doesn't happen in the Exodus version.
Yes. So in the Exodus version, what do we see? Moses is like sitting around, right? And everybody's coming because the judge sits, right? He's sitting and everybody's coming to him as if he were a king to solve all of his problems. In the Deuteronomy version of it, we see that it wasn't a different perspective of it, that people were kvetching, right? Or we can also read it the way that Sherry implied, that he's retelling the story, but telling it to a different audience, right? And so his experience with the first group of people is second than the second group of people. And so he's just like changing it to suit them, to fit them. Beautiful. Okay. Ed.
Yes. Also, you notice in Deuteronomy, Moses is stating specific instructions for the judges.
Yes. Okay. So, right. So it was a little bit more, this is how delegation was created. Now we're getting specifics. What does it take to be a judge? What are you going to do? What are your responsibilities in this new land? And we're going to get into that next. Okay. Awesome. Oh, I'm going to go. I know. We just need mics hanging from the...
Yeah. Maybe everybody knows this already, but I have a different question. When was Deuteronomy, do we know, written by someone different than Exodus? Did they look back at Exodus and add to it? Did they disagree? I don't understand why there are two different versions of the same story.
Oh, okay. Oh my gosh. All right. Now we're going to learn J, E, P, and D. No. No. So it's an excellent question. Why are there two different versions? What is going on? So there's something in biblical study called the documentary hypothesis. In the documentary hypothesis, right, we have the legend of, right, Torah on Mount Sinai and Moses writing everything, right? And then we get to the question of, wait a minute, we're in the book of Deuteronomy where Moses dies and is buried, right? So how does that happen? And in a section of the Talmud where it happened to be in Bava Batra, it's in Bava Batra if you're doing Daf Yomi, so it was like recent that we got to study it. It was really cool. There's a debate in the Talmud that there are a few lines in the Torah that was not actually written by Moses. It was in fact written by Joshua. And there are a few lines in other books of the Torah that, like, despite the name, are written by a different person. The other rabbis in the Talmud say, no, Moses wrote these lines. A tear coming from his eye, right? As he knows he sees what's going to happen. So we have that. Then there are people who look at not just this moment, but the fact that Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 have two different creation stories, right? That the story of Noah, right? It rains and rains for 40 daisies, but then it also rains longer a couple verses later, right? So that there are these places in the Torah where, like, immediately it seems to contradict, and so they put out their different authors of different sections, including the priests that they wrote, the J and the E, it's like one who refers to God as Yud He Vav He, one who refers to God as Elohim, the priests, and then Deuteronomy. That's the J, E, P, and D. And that Deuteronomy was, in fact, a later writing. And if we had time, we could look into later writings, in fact, in the Hebrew Bible, where the king finds this book of law and suddenly changes all of the rules around the year 700. And so the premise is that Deuteronomy, this retelling, is for a different audience, right? One is for an audience that is nomadic in the desert and not staying anywhere for very long. And the other audience is one that is in their land, planted, governing, needing systems of government. So excellent question. And if you want to read more about it, there are books that go very in depth on this.
So I've always seen it as, if we're dying, what do we say to our children? What have we learned? And for me, it seems like Moses is saying, keep your history and your purpose. Your purpose is in your history. When you go forward, this is how you're to live. And this is what driving your future. So he's really telling them, remember who you are, where you come from, your purpose, and who is spearheading it for you and your generation. It is the God and what he has done for you. Keep that at heart. Pass it on. to the next generation and keep that going.
Beautiful. All right, so this is Moses' last, right. We think about him teaching his kids and what he wants to say to them, the Jewish people being his children.
In the first case, the buck stops with Moses. In the second case, later edition, the buck stops with God. It goes on because Moses isn't there anymore.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Okay, so why I wanted to start out with this so that we could notice a few things, like really look at the difference between the passages. And I want us to see that already in the Torah itself, Torah is being reinterpreted. So when we talk about the Torah, we talk about the history of Reform Judaism, right? What do? We look at the sacred books, we look at our sacred teachings, which includes rabbinic interpretation, right? We're part of rabbinic Judaism. And we say, what is the forest, right? What is the message behind it? What is it trying to teach me? And then how do I apply it to the world today? Okay? So let's just take any example. Like you could use Shabbat, you could use kashrut. Let's use kashrut, right? So what did it mean to keep kosher in the ancient world, right? Might be different than today, right? Because in the ancient world, everything was local and organic. It was. You wouldn't be sending like meat from the rainforest to us in America to eat, right? So maybe if I look at kashrut and like what is it trying to accomplish? It's trying to make me think of like the holiness of creation, right? Blessing the plants I'm going to eat, thinking of the life of the animal, right? The kosher slaughter is making us do it in a humane way. And then maybe I have to completely reinterpret what it means to eat kosher now. Maybe it doesn't, right? There are kosher factory farms where animals are not treated humanely, right? Is that kosher to me? I don't know. All right, but what we're seeing, the point is not that. The point is that we can do that with any rules. But I want us to see that Moses is already doing this in the Torah. Already doing this. What does it mean to have leaders of wandering tribes versus what does it mean to have leaders of municipalities? Yeah, Bobby.
There seems to be a subtle difference between Exodus and Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy seems to be laying a format for how the people will be governed when they get into the land and setting up a structure of adjudicating who's right, who's wrong, what are the rules and mores you live by, and it sets the structure based upon the tribes. As in Exodus, it's all Moses. Moses makes the appointments. Moses decides who will be the judges, and it's a much different paradigm. In Deuteronomy, it's setting up a structure based upon a land that is not ruled by a king.
Beautiful. Right, how is it going to be different? And remember, yes, kings come later, and the people ask for a king. That is not the vision that is laid out. One of the other things that I want you to notice between the two, speaking of like kings, in the Exodus version, Moses picks out the men of spirit, of wisdom, right? In the Deuteronomy version, we pick them. The tribe picks them. Democracy. Interesting, right? So, as you're saying, we're getting ready for this different type of structure. We are going to no longer be in a place where we have this intermediary Moses between us and God. So we need to set up a different kind of justice system. Okay, and another thing, okay, so, sorry, I can't read my own handwriting, so that's what happened. I made a note, and I'm like, what is this chicken scratch? Okay, So we're entering, first of all, we have Moses taking responsibility in a different way, and thinking about how now that we're entering our own land, how are the laws going to be different? Right? In Exodus, we saw a big reversal of the structure in Egyptian society that you can think of like a pyramid versus what we wanted to see even while we were in the wilderness, where Moses is a servant, right, of the people. And now we need a different kind of structure as well. Okay, so we're thinking about this now, clearly, because we're entering into the promised land. We're going to have our own country. We need to think about how it can be justly set up, and set up in a way that we really haven't seen in any other place. And Moses, of course, is, as you said, like facing his own mortality, knows he's going to die, wants to set up the people for success and for this vision not to die with him. Okay. So I want us to think now we're going to shift to the role of the judge. Okay, so let's do text number 1. All right, Ed, I have your mic here. All right. This is from biblical scholar Patrick Miller.
Okay. Patrick Miller, Deuteronomy 1990. Fulfillment of God's promises does not mean that all is perfect and there is nothing left to do, as if the story of God's way with Israel were a fairy tale that comes to an end once the primary goal is reached. The blessing brings with it demands and responsibilities, indeed in a way not true before the promise was accomplished. From here on, Deuteronomy stresses that the blessing, gifts, and prosperity, by their very existence, place burdens, require leadership, and demand shared responsibilities and work.
All right, thank you. So here we fulfilled the promise, as Moses said, right, in Deuteronomy, right? Your God has multiplied you until you are today as numerous as the stars in the sky. And now we're entering into the promised land. These were the promises made to Abraham. So those promises, it's not a perfect ending, right? It's not the end of Prince of Egypt, right? Or pick your Disney movie, right? It's not a perfect bow, and now we're happily ever after. Like, now's when the work starts. Now we have to do our work. And so as we get these gifts, they require of us responsibility. So the next, yeah.
I just want to say that what's happening.
Sorry.
Moses in Exodus was a person. Moses in Deuteronomy is a teacher. And he's teaching them what's going to happen. He's setting the foundation for everybody, versus in the beginning he was receiving the information. Now he's teaching the information.
Beautiful. All right. So before he was like a conduit.
Right. And now he's a teacher.
And now he's a teacher. How are you going to do this without me?
But he's also pointing out to them how they've screwed up.
Yeah.
It's constant screwing up, and he points out to them that because of them, he's not going into the promised land. I mean, that to me is a very, very important line, because he knows what they've done. He did his best. He followed his father-in-law's suggestions. He did it all, but now these people did not do what they should have done. He's laying it out for them now. You screwed up. We sent the guides out. You didn't honor them. Now you're going to have to do it. Step up and do it yourselves. And in a way, I kind of agree that this is his living will to them, is saying to them, this is what we've been through. Now you guys have got to get it together. And he's really laying it out. You've got to be fair. You've got to judge. You've got to choose the right people to be your judges. I mean, this is a terrific portion, I think.
I agree. You're making me think of two things. One is Rabbi Barris, right? He's not here because he's taking Ella to college. So she's going to be a freshman at Tulane. Yay for her. Awesome. Right? But when we send our kids out of the nest, right? You're great, you're wonderful, you're smart, you're capable, and don't make all the same mistakes, right? Learn your lesson. Like you need those lessons, especially in this world where everything is recorded from now on, right? Right, make smarter mistakes, different mistakes. Don't keep making the same mistakes. So I love that. And I agree with you. I love this text, and I think it's so important for us to think about as we're gonna move into a section where we talk about like the advice that Moses gives for the judges and like how we can apply it to ourselves, but also when we think about who do we elect, right? We have an election coming up. By the way, you can vote right now in the
early vote.
Primaries. Thank you. I'm like primaries. Primaries. So to think about like this criteria, maybe nobody fits it, right? But how do we get close?
Just to be pedantic, it wasn't the people that Moses is speaking to now why he's not going into Israel. It was all of their parents. He's the last surviving of the right, because that was the reason they stayed longer. So, but the point being, you can still learn the lessons from the mistakes our parents make, and you hope our children learn from mistakes that we make, so they don't have to make the same dumb mistakes over again.
Beautiful, beautiful, right? And it's also, this is actually we feel like we need to be perfect examples for our kids, right? Oh no, I never broke the rules. I never got in trouble. I never experimented. Like, you know, I remember once being in religious school and somebody asked us if we all thought that our parents were virgins when they got married. It's weird what sticks with us, right? Like, not necessarily like lessons on what the Hebrew meant, but this question sticks with me. You know, and it's like everybody thought our parents were virgins when they got married, right? That wasn't true. Because I went home and then asked my parents, and they laughed and laughed. Anyways, so, like, it's actually important for us to tell our kids that we mess up, that when things go wrong, and to actually share with each other as well for a few reasons. One, so that when our kids and everybody realizes, right, the opposite of social media, which is that we are not perfect, that life is not perfect, and that we all mess up all of the time, and life continues, right? And therefore, you can mess up, and you can be resilient, right? So beautiful, but that I love that this is a different group of people. Don't do not only the same mistakes that you've done in the past, but don't mess up the way that your parents did. Okay, so I loved this text from Patrick Miller because it is very much like a biblical superhero quote, right? With great power comes great responsibility. Here we are entering into a new land, and we're going to have new responsibilities. I love this book, The Unbearable Lightness of Being, so I brought this quote. He is not a biblical scholar. As far as I know, he could have been. Milan Kundera, he passed away, I think, last year.
The heaviest of burdens is therefore simultaneously an image of life's most intense fulfillment. The heavier the burden, the closer our lives come to the earth, the more real and truthful they become. Conversely, the absolute absence of burden causes man to be lighter than air, to soar into heights, to take leave of the earth and his earthly being, and become only half real, his movements as free as they are insignificant. That when...
What then?
What then shall we choose, weight or lightness?
Okay. All right, so here, Kundera is talking about how responsibility holds us down and keeps us toward the earth. So you think about like the lives of these people before this moment. right? Dinner's raining from heaven, right? All I have to do every morning is go and gather it, follow the rules that are being like directly told to me, right? But now they're entering into a land where they're going to have to work the land, right, to get their own food. There's not going to be a magic well that follows them everywhere they go, right? They're going, and they're not going to have Moses to go to solve every problem. This is truly the kids are grown up, and now they have to take care of themselves. And yet, we can get so much meaning out of responsibility, right? When he talks about this, conversely, the absolute absence of burden causes a man to be lighter than air, soar into the heights, take leave of the earth, right? It sounds phenomenal until he says, and become only half real. His movements as free as they are insignificant. Right, so summer break, maybe you got to go on vacation, I don't know, like go away, right? Vacations are fun and freeing and often, right? Not always, right? And you feel this lightness of being, right? And how long can we really stay in that space? For each of us, it's different. Some people can do it a lot. I get itchy after like a week. I start to find myself doing work even while I'm on vacation. All right, so here we have blessings require responsibility. So what are some blessings that require responsibility? Parenthood. Great example. Nothing. You guys come on, I like interaction. Yeah. Oh, child of older parents, right? So the blessing of still having your parents here, which is a huge blessing, is that often they need your help, right? They need you to start taking care of them. Right? We have the blessing of gainful employment. It comes with a lot of responsibility. Owning a home, right? Lots of responsibility.
You can't live your life on vacation all the time. Burdens you have to learn to accept your burdens, and you'll be better off if you have that to keep you down to earth, so to speak.
Nice. Yes. Okay. Yes. So look at the burdens as a privilege, right? That's a beautiful practice for us, right? To look at our burdens as a privilege. All right. So I want to quickly revisit what Moses says to the judges. You can see I tried to highlight it, so it's gray. He says, "Hear out your fellow Israelites, and decide justly between one party and the other, be it a fellow Israelite or a stranger. You shall not be partial in judgment. Hear out low and high alike. Fear neither party, for judgment is God's. And any matter that is too difficult for you, you shall bring to me, and I will hear it." Okay, so this is his advice. So one of the things that we don't see, I just want to point out, you can't really see it in the English here. The fellow Israelites, this is these are your brothers, acheichem. So throughout Deuteronomy, you find, and actually throughout the Talmud, in the book of Sanhedrin, when it's talking about judges, it frequently, it refers to your fellow Israelites always as your brothers. Right? So this is family brothers. So it does a couple of things in terms of making us remember the humanity of the people that we're standing in front of. So we have on our bima dalifne miata omed, know before whom you stand. That is the idea there is, right, that we're always standing before God. But I have rabbinic colleagues who put it on the bima facing them, right? Know before who you stand in terms of the people. And I know a few judges who also have that on their desk, I guess, or wherever. The bench. Okay. All right, so let's look at text number 3 and
And in parts of the South now, they have the 10 Commandments in their schools. But that's another matter.
That is another bet. Let's see if they stop committing adultery.
Okay. Walter Brueggemann, Deuteronomy. God wants Israel to build a just society, and Moses thus understands that, quote, a trustworthy judiciary is a sine qua non for a covenant community. It is the judge's task to ensure that the land given in promise will be a land kept in Torah.
Okay. All right, let's do the next text as well,
Okay.
the Tigay.
And Jeffrey Tigay in Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy regularly uses this term, achim, brothers, to emphasize the equality and fraternity of all Israelites, whether king or servant, prophet or king. Do not be afraid of anyone, for judgment is God's. It also refers to the non-resident
Yes.
ger as well. Yeah.
Right, beautiful. So there's a couple of things in that, right? So one is like, it is very expensive to go to court, right? Especially now. So here, the stranger and the poor person, right? People who in another kind of society would really have trouble going to court and seeking out justice. They are mentioned, right? In what Moses is saying, that they are supposed to also be able to get justice. It doesn't matter if you're a citizen, same laws apply, and it doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. Again, right, this is the ideal society that we're trying to create when we have control over our own land. So how do we do that? And look at this, the Tigay's quote, I really liked it, right? Whether king or servant, prophet or king, right? So nobody's above the law. Yeah, take a moment. All right. All right, so I actually put, this quote is actually going back to one of the things that Moses said. Do not be afraid of anyone, for judgment is God's. I want to kind of try and unpack what do we think that means. Don't be afraid of anyone, for judgment is God's. We're talking to, again, here we're talking to judges in particular. All right, we can just look at what the scholars say. All right. Is this something I said? All right, let's go. Who has the mic here? Hillary, will you read for us? Will you read
The Mishnah
text
Torah.
number 5? Yeah.
The Mishnah Torah, the Sanhedrin, and the penalties within their jurisdiction. Do not be intimidated by any person. That verse implies that one should not say, so-and-so is wicked, maybe he will kill my son, set fire to my crops, or cut down my trees. If he was an expert appointed to judge the many, he is obligated to involve himself with them in all circumstances.
Okay, beautiful. So here, who are we afraid of? Who is the judge afraid of? Wicked. The wicked litigants. Okay, right? Wicked litigants, right? Or powerful, right? Right? There's one of my closest friends lives across the street from a judge, right? And if there's a really contentious trial, there will be a police officer in front of the house, right? Because Florida, we list where everybody lives. You can figure it out. So don't be afraid of that powerful person that's in front of you. That's okay. So that's one interpretation from the Mishnah Torah, which of course is Maimonides, of what it means to don't be afraid of anyone. So let's look at another interpretation. This comes from Chronicles. Sherry.
King Yehoshaphat,
Yeah.
to the appointed judges, consider what you are doing, for you judge not on behalf of human beings, but on behalf of the Lord, who is with you when you pass judgment. Now let the fear of the Lord be upon you, and act with care, for there is no injustice or favoritism or bribery with the Lord our God.
Okay, so here, who should we be fearing? Just God. Okay. Don't worry about don't worry about who's in front of you. All right, sorry. We're gonna keep going. I feel like a little off. My head is full still. All right.
Once do we know whether a disciple who is present when his master judges a case and sees a point which will tell in favor of a poor person or against a rich one, should not keep silent. From the words of the text, do not be afraid of anyone.
Okay, so here in the Babylonian Talmud, who should we not be scared of? This is another judge, our superior, our colleague. Okay? So don't be scared of colleagues or superiors. Yeah, Bobby.
When judges take the bench, they're commanded to judge without either fear or favor. You think about the universe that covers.
Yes. Okay, beautiful. So this is still something that we do today. Judge without fear or favor. Right? So here we get who we're not supposed to be afraid of, how we're supposed to approach judgment. Right? We're not supposed to fear the powerful litigants who are standing in front of us that we think may be able to wreak consequences on us. That's a big ask, right? That's a very big ask. Don't fear our colleagues and their judgment of our judgment and our superiors. So this is really, how hard is this? Very difficult. Really difficult. Really difficult. Right? How hard is this? And so what's our North Star during all of this? God. Right? How are we going to keep ourselves strong? Right? When we're telling, right? I think we can all think of examples, right? We can all think of examples. In the context of a synagogue, when you're telling a major donor that the synagogue has a policy that they don't like, right? Or that we are doing X that they feel, whatever, that you're making a decision they don't like, right? And then when they leave, if they leave, the criticism of your colleagues in the board, right? Like the superiors, right? It all happens, right? But, so what's our North Star? Like, who do we serve at the end of the day? Everybody, right? But God has to be our North Star. So I want us to shift. Rabbi Held. Will you read the quote from Rabbi Held? Because I love him, and I love this.
Rabbi Shai Held, Moses' words are like a stick of dynamite thrown into a crowd of anxious communal professionals. Despite everything, do not be afraid. What Moses asks for in his judges, and by extension, what we should look for in rabbis and communal leaders is courage. But just what is courage, and what does it entail?
Okay, so we're going to look at what courage is, right? So I want us to think about, moments in our daily lives where we need courage, right? We all have it. We have it just leaving the house, right? Having conversations, giving all of those words, right? When we're giving critique, when we are interacting with others, especially people who are not in lockstep with us on whatever opinion or sometimes even facts we're sharing, right? Okay, so You can read the poetry on your own. I want to go to 10, where it's Rabbi Margolius. So he is one of the modern teachers of Musar. He has a few books. So he talks about the Hasidic master, Rab Nachman of Breslov, and a song that we all know, Kol ha'olam kulo, gesher tzar me'od, gesher tzar me'od, v'ha'ikar, lo lefached klal. All right, so fun song to sing, and it is, the whole world is a very narrow bridge, and the main thing is just to not be afraid. Right? So how do we live in this world where we're walking a narrow bridge, right? Where it's pretty terrifying, and one wrong step, we could fall? How do we live in this world and not be afraid? So how do we have courage? And he shares with us that his actual recorded teaching is even more subtle and close to our experience. He says the word lifached, don't be afraid, actually Rav Nachman uses the reflexive form lehit pached, right? Which means to make yourself afraid. So it isn't the whole world is a narrow bridge and it's only that we shouldn't be afraid. The whole world's a narrow bridge and we shouldn't make ourselves scared, right? Okay, so he says, for Nachman, courage is not about denying or repressing fear. Rather, the fundamental principle of courage is choosing not to frighten ourselves beyond the fear we already experience. Fear is unavoidable, perhaps even required. Courage involves moving forward despite our fear and not exacerbating our anxieties. Right? So we don't, what is the point? Right? What is the point? I actually, it's interesting, I did this once on an airplane at a pretty young age, and I do it ever since, right? Turbulence, right? Turbulence on an airplane is terrifying, right? Especially after yesterday. My being scared and freaking out, is it going to help anything? No. Right? You can only do what you can do, and then you can't do anything anymore, right? Right? So getting ourselves anxious and scared and all of that, is it helping us, right? If it is helping us, so that, right, oh, a hurricane is coming, and I'm freaking out, and therefore I am, right, getting my house hurricane prepared, that's a good thing, right? I'm freaking out, and therefore I am immobile on the floor, not helpful, right? So how is it that we don't lehit pached, like continue to like build ourselves up into anxious states where we are no longer being productive? I can't stand over there, apparently. Okay. Okay, so he says, in fact, simply observing the fact that we are afraid without judging ourselves, remember we talked about self-judgment, for that emotion, offers the possibility of acting in a way that is not determined by that fear. That is ometz lev. Ometz lev, that's what, it's courage, right? It means strengthening our hearts. That is courage, doing what is right and just, even in the face of challenging emotions. So how do we do what's right and just? Like even when we have fear. So, God can say, and Moses can say all they want, don't be afraid. Fear is a valid emotion, right? But the lehit pached, the continuing to add fuel to the fire and building ourselves up and making ourselves anxious, that is not helpful. There is what to fear. Okay, so you can see on the last page this little line. So you got I know Ed recognizes this. So in Musar practice, right, all of our emotions So here we're going to think about courage, right? It all comes on a spectrum, right? And we can think about who doesn't have courage and who has maybe too much courage, right? So who doesn't have courage? Who are those kinds of people? Nebbish, all right? Awesome, okay. Nebbish, coward, yeah, like anxious people who don't leave their, like I just picture somebody like in their house, right? Phobia, unable to move. And then if we have too much, then we get to the point of being reckless. Okay. So the goal is to have like the right midah, the right measurement, to be somewhere in the middle that looks like courage and bravery. And then I gave you quotes from our sacred scriptures on both sides. So here, I'm going to have, Paul, will you read 11? This is Proverbs 28. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Nancy. Thank you.
Happy is the person who is always afraid, but one who hardens his heart falls into misfortune.
Okay, so here, happy is the person who's always afraid, right? But who hardens his heart, who has so much love, right? Falls into misfortune. What? Right? So, wait, what? Like, why do we want to always be afraid? Okay, so what's the good of being afraid?
Well, if you're being afraid of God, that I think is what the reference is.
Okay, it's good you want to be afraid of your higher power, right? What happens when we think no one's ever looking and we're never going to be judged for our actions, right? We become
Corrupt.
Say it?
Corrupt.
Corrupt. We become corrupt. There's no consequences. I am God. I get to decide what's right. I do whatever I want, right? Happy is the person who's always afraid. There is one of our midot, one of our qualities that we try and actually like enhance in us is yirat Hashem, fear of God. If you're scared of a higher power who knows, like, it knows when you are sleeping, he knows when you're awake, right? If you, like, then,
That was Santa Claus.
you know, I always say the Santa Claus God. All right, okay, so, but it is good to believe that we serve a higher power than ourselves, even if we don't think it's a Santa Claus version of it. Okay, so it's good to be afraid in certain situations, because if we're not afraid, we become reckless, we become dangerous, we lose our sometimes like scruples and morality, and we have no judgment. No judgment. Okay, will you read 12?
Look to the Lord, be strong and of good courage. Oh, look to the Lord.
All right, so here, right, be strong and of good courage, right? So have that omet slav. Harden your heart, right? So the juxtaposition, right here we have the opposite, right? Be great, right? Be strong, or else what's going to happen to us? We're not going to act. We're not going to interact in the world. We're going to hide out. And guess what? There's a big problem now with people never leaving their homes. And it's not just, you know, elderly people like who maybe have trouble, mobility issues. It's young people. It's teenagers who won't leave their houses. They're scared to go to school. They're scared to go outside, and they believe that they can totally live online. There's actually a term in I'm forgetting it though, but there's a Japanese term for it, in particular, young men who never leave the home anymore. We need to have strength and be of good courage. Okay. And then here we have 3 more quotes, all from sacred writings. Do you want to read a Chronicles for us? Roosevelt? Oh.
You have nothing to fear but fear itself.
Nothing to fear but fear itself.
I thought that was, what's his name, the English guy?
Winston Churchill. I was thinking, I thought you're thinking of what is it, the quote from the Man in the Ring? Do you know this? I think that's the Roosevelt quote, like the man in the arena, like ignore the cynic or the critic who's on the side.
That's the Teddy Roosevelt.
Teddy Roosevelt. Wrong Roosevelt. Okay. All right. This is fun. All right. Let's we read Chronicles.
David also said to Solomon his son, "Be strong and courageous and do the work. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord God, my God, is with you. He will not fail you or forsake you until all the work for the service of the temple of the Lord is finished."
Okay. So here, I wanted to give these last few because we're seeing a repetition of these quotes, right? Moses gives this advice to Joshua, right? Right at the end of Numbers. So you heard this 2 weeks ago, right? Be strong, don't be afraid. Moses wishes Joshua courage as the next leader. Now he's wishing it to the judges. Be strong and courageous. And this is the advice that is given from leader to leader, throughout our sacred books. David tells Solomon, I love his addition, be strong and courageous and do the work, right? Because that's what really what they're all asking. Don't be scared to do your job. This is your job. This is what you were put here to do. This is your mission. This is going to give you meaning in life. This is that unbearable heaviness that is holding you to the earth, right? And yes, it would feel great to fluff it off, but then you're flying high and you are insignificant. It's great to push off our responsibilities. It feels wonderful, but guess what? You're not doing your job. You are ignoring what you were put here on the planet to do. And so we get this as well from Isaiah, and Gershonides, the Ralbag, talks about the importance of this balance, of understanding where we need to be. Right? Don't be so scared that you are immobile, but that doesn't mean go and be reckless and right. Because and our guiding star in all of this is our higher power, is God. So when God comes into conflict with our superiors and our colleagues, we need to take a moment to practice bravery. Bravery is not calling names or telling them it doesn't mean being unpolitical, right? It doesn't mean twisting the knife when you have a powerful litigant in front of you, right? It doesn't mean being reckless. But it means always having a North Star, and that North Star being the Torah. Moses is leaving the people. It is terrifying, right, to let your kids go off to college, to let people leave the nest. It is terrifying sometimes for us as individuals to even leave the house. It's even harder, right, when we have to say something that somebody doesn't want to hear, or say something that is going to make us unliked, God forbid, right? But we have great power, and that great power means that we have a lot of responsibility. And that is because we are God's people. We, not just the people in the Torah, but we have been given the Torah. We no longer have a Moses, right? We don't have a pope. We don't have each of us has the ability to be conduits of a higher power. If we find ourselves over here and doing dangerous and reckless things, then maybe we're no longer serving God, but we're serving ourselves. But we need to strengthen our hearts and stand up for something. And it feels good to not have to stand up for anything. It feels good to just get along and have fun and go on vacation. But that's not what we're here for. We're here to do the work. So I want to thank you guys for doing the work, for showing up, for being bearers of Torah. And I want to wish you Shabbat Shalom. Paul. Thank you. Thank you.
Commend you for the work that went into putting this together.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Paul. It means a lot.